Hi, and welcome to Close Up with the Hollywood Reporter Animation. I'm Carolyn Jardina. Let's introduce our guest.
Hi, I'm Kori Ray, and I am the producer of Onward.
Hello, I'm Glen Keane, director of Over the Moon.
Hi, I'm Mark Swift, producer of Croods, A New Age.
Hi, this is Gitanjali Rao, the director of Bombay.
Hi, I'm Tomm Moore. I directed Wolfwalkers with Ross Stewart.
And I'm Pete Doctor. I was director of Soul.
Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope everyone's doing well and staying safe. I'm going to direct our first question to Glen. Glen, on route to becoming a Disney legend, you were trained under Disney's 9 Old Men. You designed Ariel and The Little Mermaid, and you were the supervising animator on title characters in Beauty and Aladdin. What have you learned about what makes a great animated character?
The best characters are characters that you can relate to. You see in them something of yourself. Those are the ones that audiences connect with. Though these characters are, imaginary, I have this strange belief that when you are designing an animated character, you are designing a character that's actually existing before you do the work on it, that they reveal themselves to you. Like there's a moment in drawing a character where you've tried 100 different versions until one of those drawings happens and you feel like they are looking at you from the paper or whatever it is you're creating on. As if they've existed before. And that's the moment that I look for, like, okay, now we are going to go on this journey in this movie, and that they live on beyond when a shot ends. The life of that character doesn't end. You just don't show more of it, but they continue on. They're before the cut and they're after the cut. I mean, characters have to live like that.
Could you describe one of those moments you had with one of your characters over the years?
Yeah, I remember I was animating Ariel in Little Mermaid, and I was about 33 years old, and I'm being a 16-year-old mermaid girl, and I was at a certain point, Ariel was swimming towards the camera. She's singing Part of Your World, and I suddenly started to become self-conscious, like I was going to show just how sentimental and sappy I was as she was reaching out and longing to be part of that world. And as she drifts back down, and I thought, I can't do this. I mean, this is revealing too much of myself. And I tried to stop Ariel from doing that, but I couldn't. She just kept swimming closer and closer to the camera. And I learned that the character is telling you what they are going to do. Years later, I was talking at Cal Arts, and a student said, "Mr. Keane, do you remember this moment where Ariel was reaching out?" And I said, yeah, no, I remember that. Well, I was 4 years old in the theater, and I stood up at that moment when she's reaching out, and I put my hands out to take her hands to pull her towards me because I knew she wanted to be part of my world. And, I just said, I could kiss you, thank you. But I think that's what we all want to do. Our characters, we want them to touch the audience, to break that wall that they're not on the screen, they're in your life as much as possible.
You all created such fantastic characters this year. Would each of you talk about the genesis of your leads? Let's start with Onward. Tom Holland and Chris Pratt voice brothers Ian and Barley. Ian is shy and insecure, while Barley is impulsive, and this was central to the story. How did you develop these characters and develop their chemistry?
Yeah, it was a ton of fun, and we did have the great kind of joy of creating Ian after the director. I mean, it's kind of Onward is based on a true story of director Dan Scanlon, and a touchstone. It's not necessarily Dan, but a lot of the traits, the shy kind of awkward teenager, did kind of come from him. So he was really our the muse for everybody, the designers and the animators alike. But it really clinched once we cast Tom Holland. It was tricky to find someone who had the great acting chops we needed, as well as have that innocence and charm. And as soon as we got Tom, the character really kind of took off, I think, and he was able to bring so much to the character of Ian in that way, and just kind of bring it home. So it was a lot of fun.
And Mark, in the Croods, A New Age, you introduced new characters, the Bettermans. Tell us about your idea.
Yeah, obviously we're a sequel, so we kind of had developed characters, but we had 3 new characters. And I think for us, we were thinking, the Bettermans live in isolation in a treehouse, and they don't come across anyone else. And so we started to try and think, what would that mean if you lived in isolation? And I think for us, the girl character in the, just trying to think of her, like, if you've never met another family, other people your own age, what would that mean? And we sort of pictured her a little bit as a sort of a homeschooled girl. And one of the things that was interesting, when we got the original script that we were kind of working off, there was a love triangle going on between Dawn and Eep, and they were kind of jealous between each other. And one of the things we kind of really questioned was, if you were the only girl in the world and then suddenly you met another girl, what would your reaction be? Would it be one of, oh, I think I'm going to be jealous? Or would it be one of an excitement of finding a friend and having friendship? And so we kind of went in that direction with them, which we felt was kind of a more positive kind of outlook for that family.
And Tom, in your case, your protagonist had to additionally take the form of a wolf. Tell us about creating her character.
We started thinking of her human form first, and she was originally a boy, and that wasn't working, and wasn't like, we had a whole draft of the script and we were drawing a little boy and trying to write obstacles for this little boy. Why would he be stopped from being a hunter in this time period? And it wasn't working. And we hit on the point after the first draft that it needed to be a little girl. And it was Inktober at the time, and I just for fun drew my wife as a child in like a little boy from that time period's hunting costume, and it really clicked for me because I could imagine my wife in it as a fierce and determined young woman going against the grain of what society was telling her she could or couldn't do. That's a trick I've always used, because I think that if you can think of somebody, at least partially, that you know and love, you can live with the character for as long as it's going to take to get the movie made. And before that, I didn't really know who Robin was, and then I knew, and I thought about a young Jane Goodall or even Greta Thunberg and these kind of determined young women. So that made a lot of sense and clicked together. And then we did some animation tests, and we kind of found a little head shake that just felt right for her. And then when we did the wolf character design, we kept a lot of her kind of gangly but elegant long legs, kind of preteen kind of legs, and a long snout, and we gave her that little head shake. When what she did in her human form, we wanted her to do in her wolf form. But honestly, it wasn't until we cast Honor Neefsey, the voice, and she came in, and just the character really existed then, because once her relationship with her co-star Ava was sparking, you could, the character was drawings, and we had some animation tests, and I kind of knew who she was, but she really gelled together when we recorded the voice, and I felt, and now I could tell you what Robin would do in any given situation for the rest of the production, and that was it, really.
Can you tell us about Joe Gardner?
Joe is kind of born out of jazz. We were looking for different occupations to show his sort of artist journey, and we were looking at maybe actor, but then someone sent me this Herbie Hancock video where he told this story of playing with Miles Davis, and he said, we were on this tour, it was so great, and we were on this one concert, and it was the highlight of the tour, and then I played this chord that was so wrong that I worried I ruined that whole concert. And he said instead Miles looked at him, took a breath, and he said he played some notes and he made my chord right. And I was like, I couldn't figure out, how did he do that? And he said he took years to figure out how he did. He said how he did it was he didn't judge what had happened. He just took it as something new. And he did what any great jazz musician should do, is try to take anything that happens and turn it into something of value. And my brain just kind of went, okay, that's exactly what we're trying to say in the film. Our character knows that musically, but doesn't know it in his life. And I think that's kind of where that whole character came from. And then, of course, Jamie Foxx, as an actor, could do everything we wanted from him. He has comedic chops and dramatic chops, and he could be a classical musician. He's that good. So he really brought everything. And, of course, the character grows every time you add a new contributor like that. So it was a real joy.
And Gita, tell us about how you created Kamala.
My characters have actually lived beyond the films that I have put them in, because Bombay Rose was the one film that finished. 2 films before that, my characters were there and their stories were there, and I was trying to tell them. I couldn't find the finance, and the films never saw the light of day. So Kamala to me was actually somebody I had seen, not as an individual, but a lot of women that I would see when I would travel in the local trains in Bombay. There would be these young girls selling trinkets and these flower garlands in the train. And I'm very fond of them, so I would buy them. And that's where I got interested in them, their stories. She came from there. And so did the boy. The boy was always that other boy I would see in my life when I would be stuck in a traffic jam. One boy selling flowers and another girl selling flowers, and then flirting. And they were living on the streets. And that's where I got interested in their stories. How do they express their love? How do they survive this difficult situation and still manage to fall in love? So that's how Kamala came to me. And that's how Salim also came to me. And I realized as I was making the film that the boy and his vulnerability, his trying to be macho, his trying to be masculine, and the vulnerability was actually something that the audiences related to much more than the girl who was very sure of herself, who knew right from wrong. And I had people at the end of the film asking me questions like, did your hero have to die? Because he dies at the end of the film and the love is unrequited. They were very emotional. They said, why? Yeah, I know. Why do you have to kill him? And I said, but it's like a Romeo and Juliet, right? You have to die for a film to be an epic love story. But of course, it's a very real love story. So the death is very real. But then I realized that although she's a protagonist, what I have managed to achieve is to look at this boy from her point of view and look at him as a man, as a young, vulnerable male from a female point of view. So that even when there was a scene in which he is taking a bath by the sea and he takes off his shirt, and my producer, when she saw the film, she said, oh, he's so sexy. And I said, I never thought of it like that. But yes, he was. And then we pushed it because you never see the man as a sexy being in an animated film ever. So I said, okay, let me try this. And it worked to the point that when he died, people were very sad because he was a sexy young man who died. So I think I think somewhere the characters just clicked with the audience just by being honest to them.
In this case, for Bombay Rose, you wrote, you directed, you designed, and you edited the film. How unusual is it to have all of those roles in India's film industry?
The truth is, in India, we don't have any kind of financing for animation films. So if I wanted to make a film, which I wanted to do back in the 1990s, the only way I could do it was if I animated it myself, if I did everything myself, and then, which is how I was making my short films. And then when I made a feature film, I did find the finance and I did work with a studio. But by then my style had become so personal. I could do all of those roles and have a team assisting me with it. So since it was a very personal film with a very individual style, it was almost like a short film, but made on a feature length, that the entire team just adjusted with my style and with my storytelling, which is why it is not really conventional. It's not a children's film, none of those things. But I tried to make it in a situation where we are not making animation films at all. We're making 900 live action films in a year in this country, and maybe 4 or 5 of them, which is like 0.05% of films are animation. So to try something new is always new. Everything is new. So I tried it and it kind of worked. And I found the French co-production, which is where my country decided, oh, it must be good if the French are interested. And that's where I got the Indian finance and managed to make the film.
God for the French.
Well, Glenn, Over the Moon was co-produced with China's Post. In your case, the film follows a Chinese girl named Fei Fei. Do you want to tell us about creating your character and also how you put the story up in?
Well, it was very important to go to China and experience what China is. I only knew it from, whatever anybody reads about, but it's a whole different thing once you go there. We visited a school, and I was in the classroom and I couldn't speak Chinese, but here's all these little kids, and I'm just looking at them, and they're living their life and they're seeing their world from their point of view. They thought I was Walt Disney, I think. They put on a big play of all the Disney movies, particularly Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and they had this whole thing. They're honoring me for being something I'm really not, but they were so excited about animation. But there was this one little girl sitting in the front row of this one classroom, and I had my sketchbook, and I'm always just drawing, and when I looked at her, I was like, that's Fei Fei. And I did this little sketch. Her hair was kind of like that, and she was kind of giving me this victory, this peace sign. And as I was designing the character, thinking about who she is in the movie, it was that little girl, and it was the voice of Kathy Ang, who really inspired so much of the inside of the character coming out. And it was Audrey Wells' beautiful description of this girl who faces a crisis in her life of losing her mom, and her world turns upside down, and somehow the solution to her problem of her dad remarrying is going to go to the dark side of the moon to meet this famous goddess, Chang'e, that everybody in China knows about. And these are all new things to me. But what I really connected with was how smart this girl was. She knows math and science and physics and technology on one side, and she's a lot like her dad. And then on the other side, her mom fills her with these stories of imagination, and she sees what no one else can see and believes what others don't believe. And I really connected with this character and wanted to animate from the inside out, as I was taught, don't animate what the character is doing, animate what the character is thinking and feeling. And it was so wonderful to live in her skin. At one point, I was reading in the script where she's going to build this rocket to the moon. And I thought, wait a second, I've lived this. And I remember when I was 7 years old, my dad, for my birthday, came into the room with a bunch of my friends there, and he said, all right, I've got a surprise for everybody. And we're listening, and he says, I have a friend from NASA, and they've developed a new rocket ship, and it's sitting in the backyard, just a small one. And if you'd like, you can go for a ride on it. Would you like to? And we're all like, yes, yes. And he says, okay, well, one at a time. And the thing is, it's top secret, so I'm going to have to blindfold each one of you before you can ride on it. So one by one, you're blindfolded, and you can hear ground control as you climb up under the rocket ship. And he says, it's an open cockpit because we got a lot of kids in line. We got to do this pretty quick. But, we're going to have this countdown. And so you can hear, okay, we're ready for liftoff. 5, 4, 3, 2, the rocket starts shaking, and you go up and you can feel the wind in your face. And we went over a lake. The wonderful thing was you're not disappointed by that being taken off. It's even more wonderful because you realize this all happened in my head, and everything is possible with your imagination. And I thought that's what I get to do with this movie through Feifei, is that the audience is going to experience this crazy, unbelievable world of going to the dark side of the moon, and Lunaria and all of that. And I get to take them on this rocket ship. That's kind of what animation is. It's just kind of wrapped up in that little moment for me. And it was a wonderful realization.
Pete, for Soul, which centers on the New York jazz scene, you worked with fellow writer and co-director Kemp Powers, who will appear this season on our Hollywood Reporter Writers Roundtable. Would you talk about the effort to keep the story authentic?
Yeah, I mean, when we decided to make our main character a jazz musician, one of our consultants said, you could more accurately call jazz Black improvisational music. It was really a contribution from the African-American community. And so we thought, well, the right thing to do here is to make this character Black. We didn't set out to make the first African-American character in a Pixar film. We kind of got into it by way of some of these other decisions. But then I quickly realized I am way over my head. I don't know enough about what it is to grow up either Black in Queens as a jazz musician. So we really needed a lot of help. Kemp was the first guy to come on. He happened to be all those things. He was actually a jazz critic in a previous life. He's one of these guys who's already had like 5 hugely successful careers. He's a brilliant guy. So then we got to talk with a lot of great consultants, people like Herbie Hancock. We got to meet Quincy Jones. I mean, I was like, if this movie doesn't work out, it was all worth it, because we just had such amazing people that we got to meet, not the least of which John Batiste, who is, as much as Jamie Foxx is the voice of Joe, John is the hands and kind of soul of Joe. In fact, there are a couple lines in the script where at the very beginning, he's talking to his class about a formative experience as a kid of going to a jazz club and watching. It's that fall in love moment when you first saw what it was that set you on this trajectory for the rest of your life. He's talking about that. What I did was we tried a bunch of different scripts, but what I ended up doing was just talking to John Batiste and said, tell me about what is a formative moment that you remember going to see a musician? And he just talked, and I wrote it all down, and that's kind of what is in the script. We had so many great consultants and people who helped us to try to grab a hold of that sense of authenticity, which, as Glenn said, it's like absolutely crucial to the film. I think the audience, whether they've lived that or not, can really feel when you get it right, when you add those authentic details.
Generally speaking, there hasn't been much diversity in feature animation, particularly in leadership roles like directors and producers.
I remember Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson saying it takes about 12 years to start to learn to be a good animator, and then from there you start to grow. It's a slow learning process, so you can't just grab somebody from square one and throw them in the deep end. We've been definitely conscious at Pixar. I can only really speak to Pixar for what, Kori, like the last 5 or 6 years. It's been a very concerted effort, and Kori has done amazing things on Onward to further that, both on screen and behind the screen.
Here in Cartoon Saloon and Lighthouse Studios, we did a kind of a survey, a roundup to see where we were, and definitely in terms of gender, we found ourselves like 60% female, whatever the breakdown, like 1% sort of preferred not to conform to a certain gender, and then everyone else was male, which was amazing to me because animation had been like a submarine for so long. And I remember when we started the studio, like Nora was like the only girl in the studio for a while, and now, she's leading a team where most of the leadership on her new feature is female, which is great. In terms of other types of diversity, I think there's further to go. We had one person of color in the storyboard team, amazing guy, a director in his own right, but notably the only person. But then again, Ireland and even Europe in general, the animation scene has evened out in terms of gender, I think, a lot better. But other areas we need to do more work on. And something I think about a lot is there should be more older people and more disabled people able to make a living in animation. It's a very young industry, and able-bodied, there's not very many, and I don't see why not, because there should be an industry that could allow for that, you know. And sometimes I do wonder, where does everyone go over the age of 40, you know? Sometimes there's not that many people. The studio is very young, and I wonder why that is, and what's in the culture that's stopping people, you know, progress. So hopefully that's gonna, I don't know, hopefully that's something we can work on, you know.
I can speak over here for like DreamWorks and Universal, like all the major studios, it's a huge focus. And I think it's the right thing to do to try and increase the diversity. But the other thing is, it's a business decision as well, because, you know, the world is very diverse, and you want storytellers that come from that background to be able to tell those stories, because you know, you get movies that represent that, do great business. So it's the right thing to do, but it's also a smart thing to do. So it's, as I say, it's a huge focus here to be able to increase that at DreamWorks.
Your studios also create animated shorts. Do you see shorts programs, as well as the opportunity to distribute on streaming platforms, having impact in this area?
Yeah, I know that's for sure for us. We have this program called Spark Shorts, and it's been really beneficial in giving voice to people who wouldn't normally have a chance, and in particular because the stakes are lower. You know, it's not the huge budgets that the feature films are. It's a smaller thing, and we can just try it, and if it works, great, and if it doesn't, it always works. Frankly, it always works.
That's something that we focused on a lot, and a lot of the younger talent, and they're bringing, you know, different perspectives in the shorts, and then it's a great place for them to, you know, kind of get the confidence to pitch as feature and series ideas, and members of the LGBT community, and, you know, any different diverse background that you'd want to encourage are able to come up through the shorts much quicker. It's a long old haul to get a feature off the ground, but we see more by working with people on short, which is great.
Glenn, you recently won an Academy Award for an animated short. Would you tell us a little bit about working on Dear Basketball with Kobe Bryant?
Well, just touching on the diversity part of it, at one point, Kobe felt that there just wasn't enough of a Black influence in the world of animation. As he said, Glenn, I feel like a grain of pepper in a salt shaker here as we would visit different studios. And I think that that's an area that naturally will grow, especially now with what's happening as an impact of this pandemic with Zoom. The freedom of working with people all over the world. Recently, I was talking to a young man in Ghana who I just loved his drawings. This is in the coast where they used to sell the slaves in these little forts. And here he is, like a relative from those families, and he's showing me some work in animation, and there is no animation school there, but it looked like he was trained by the guys who mentored me, because the access is everywhere. That there's really nothing that is going to stop a young person who has, you know, access to the internet from having those resources for growing. The wonderful thing to me about animation is it opens you to all sorts of paths. And it's, at one point I left Disney, I was explaining to Ed Catmull that I just wanted to work creatively without walls. And in a world where you can contact just about anybody you want and work with anybody you want. And that's what Dear Basketball was for me. For Kobe inviting me into the NBA, but it was interesting. Our first conversation, we were trying to find like our common ground. As I told him, you got the worst basketball player on earth animating you. And so as we talked, we realized that our common ground was Beethoven. I'm not sure which one of us first started talking about Beethoven, but because I had animated Beast's transformation to Beethoven's Ninth, and how I just found that Beethoven really spoke to me as an artist, and the emotions and human experience. And Kobe's eyes lit up. He said, "What? I played the sixth game of the championship from 2009 against the Nuggets to Beethoven's Fifth." He memorized the whole symphony and played it and structured the entire game to Beethoven's Fifth. And matter of fact, if you look at him walking onto the court, he's got the headphones on, listening to Beethoven's Fifth as he's about to go out there. And it's the influence of other kinds of art forms and disciplines from every angle that can really connect and take two people that are not alike at all and find that you actually are. And who knows what those influences will be, but I think that's such an important thing, is to be open to any kind of area that's going to bring people together.
Mark, Croods: A New Age was the first studio animated feature to open in theaters amid the pandemic. How has that fared? Tell us about that.
Yeah, come out and there's 40% of the movie theaters open, and living here in Los Angeles, it amazes me anyone's been going to the movie theater, but in certain parts of the country, they felt it's safe and okay, and obviously drive-ins have been going. Look, I'm super happy some people are seeing it on a big screen. For me, we finished this movie kind of working on computer screens at home. Instead of being able to go to work and see things on a big screen, we couldn't. And we were super lucky. We got to do our mix-up at Skywalker, and they've got the best theater there. You experience the Stag Theater, and it's amazing. And then to be able to go in there and see that on the big screen, it's fantastic. So I'm pleased some people are going to experience that way. I'm also happy that we're releasing it on demand so that families around America and hopefully the world will be able to access it, in whatever way they can. Because right now, I think we all just want people to be able to have a couple of hours of, happiness and fun time as a family, and experience a movie is a great way to do that.
Now, Pete, Soul moved its theatrical release to Disney Plus. Why did the studio choose that strategy for your movie?
Well, it's funny. We were like Mark with the kind of just the studio analyzing the where we are every week. How many theaters are open and whatnot, and we were initially supposed to come out June 19th. And that was kind of like just on the surge of the worst of it. Well, now there's been worse. But it moved then to November. And it was eventually just a decision made by the studio to release on streaming because of the market just not being there, not enough people going. And of course, we have this amazing platform, Disney Plus, which is a great way for people to see it around the world. So, I will echo Mark's sentiments of, hey, we made this movie to be seen on a big screen. We filmed every frame on a big screen, and it's somewhat tragic to think this is our first of 23 features that we've done that won't have its debut that way. I hope someday we'll have some sort of release so that people can see the amazing work that everyone did, because there's some really stellar visuals that are going to be, please, all I will say is please don't watch it on your iPhone. At least like a 12-inch, at least.
Pete, I really echo what you just said, that wouldn't it be awesome it's kind of like, it's this amazing art museum where all of these incredible paintings have been hidden, and that there could be a time when all of this pandemic is over where theaters embrace all the creative work that's been done in this time and celebrate it with huge releases around the world in movie theaters, that all of our films could be being seen. It would really, really be a fantastic way to step back into the light of, freedom here.
Kori, you're nodding. Do you want to elaborate?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, and I'm one of the lucky ones. I got I think 8 days in theaters before everything shut down. So I did get a little, but I just totally agree with Glenn that it would just feel so great to get it on the big screen, even just a little longer.
I will say a lot of us grew up, I think I fell in love with animation in the theater, but I like sucked it into my soul in home video. And I think a lot of kids are the same way, and that you watch these things over and over. Like Glenn's saying, you have access to all this amazing stuff. All the animators that are coming in now are so mind-blowingly good because they had access to this whenever they wanted. They could just look up how did Bugs Bunny, how did they do that in this particular short? It's I think that access has given not just far-reaching, but like a depth to the craft that we didn't have in previous generations. So you got to give that to it.
How is everyone feeling about the future of theatrical exhibition?
I was talking to a friend about this the other day when she's a live action director over in Los Angeles, and she said that the cinemas closed down again there, and they're open here in Ireland, and Wolfwalkers is playing in a cinema that we both went to the last time she was here. And it was a gorgeous cinema because it's like an old-fashioned 1950s. I don't know if it ever existed, but there's a bar outside. I remember we saw Toy Story 3 in there, and it has like it's just beautiful. Like I remember Lee Unkrich was over, and it's called the Stella in Dublin. And it used to be just this really run-down cinema that played the Rocky Horror Picture Show over and over again for people that love the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Yeah. And they just decided to do it up and make it this real event place with, like, you know, really nice food and really nice drinks, cocktails and stuff. And you go in and sit on these like big cozy seats, and there's a little blanket and stuff if you wanted. And it's just an experience, you know, and it's really like a nice night out, like going to a good play or something like that. I'd like that to be the future. I'd love if it became that, like, you know, cinema became something that was really celebrated and you went and really enjoyed and indulged in. And I'd love if more unusual movies got a chance to play as well, because here in Ireland, outside of Dublin, most of the cinemas only show like 2 or 3 superhero movies, and all the awesome stuff, besides they're awesome, but besides some of that, we kind of have to watch on streaming anyway. So I would love if there was a change in cinemas and they became more of an event and more of a special experience, and that people kind of embraced it like that. So that would be my hope.
Yeah, which is cool when you look back in history after the 1918 pandemic. There was a big resurgence of film, and I think a lot of it, like you say, like a lot of the palatial movie houses where they really catered to, like, this is an experience. You don't get this anywhere else. You come in and there's like a palace and, you know, food and all this. And I think that kind of grew out of that. Hopefully that could happen again.
Yeah, I like when I was in Los Angeles, we showed Song of the Sea in, I think it was the Egyptian, and you could feel like this is like this is the way cinema should be, not like get some popcorn, get in, get out, you know, like, you know, I always wait to watch the credits because I often have friends who work on different movies, and they often stop the credits before they're finished. And, you know, all that stuff I think was cheapening the experience. So I hope that they make a big effort to make it worth going back in the average cinema. I know there's always been beautiful cinemas, you know, art house cinemas, but they're usually in big cities and stuff like that. It would be nice if more places made that. I hope so. That would be the hopeful.
Gitan, I'm curious about India. How's the experience in India?
No, we are one of the biggest film watching in theaters public in the world. But the pandemic has changed a lot of things, and especially where I come from, in a big city, they're all multiplexes and they're very expensive. So they have opened, but nobody's going back to them. It is so much cheaper to be sitting at home, 4 or 5 people, a family watching the films, not having to pay for your parking, for the shopping mall, for the food that you eat. Because we are a culture which has these 3-hour-long films with an interval in between where we go and get our popcorn and coffee and come back. It's not like Europe. So we want to really enjoy it. I think people have started enjoying sitting back at home and watching the films a lot more than they used to. It's looking quite bleak. But it's also true that the way the theaters and the multiplexes have, the corporates of the multiplexes have actually taken over the single screens. Cinema in India has been pursued by the working class, by the essentially the factory workers. the first show in the cinemas would start at 4:30 a.m. in the morning. That's where the factory night shift ends, and they want to keep awake and they want to watch a film. So we have had a very huge history. And as I said, we make about 900 films in different languages in the country. So for us now to see this pandemic and the close of the cinemas has been extremely huge. But also it's been one of the biggest, one of the stringest lockdowns ever. So people have forgotten entertainment completely. A few people who can afford it are into Netflix and Amazon and Disney Plus and Hotstar and things like that. But for the rest of India, entertainment right now is there is no room for it. We are in a pretty downward moment, and I don't think it's going to be as easy for us to come up back with the theaters as it is going to be for, let's say, Europe, because of the culture of watching films where people actually make an effort and go out and watch films. That's not going to happen if the tickets are too expensive and people are not earning enough money to buy them. So it's going to be a little more tragic in third world countries where entertainment is cinema is essentially entertainment, it's not education and things like that. So it's very different, but it's quite bleak.
To move to production, for those of you who had to finish your movies amid the pandemic, what's been most difficult about shifting to remote?
Well, for me, I finished it much before the pandemic. I finished it last year, middle of August last year. So I didn't suffer from it at all.
We had the last 7 weeks of production, so we did the most of it all together. But then the last 7 weeks were when we were told to evacuate, and miraculously, the systems group at work had come up with an idea to send people home with these small boxes called the Teradici, which is kind of like, as I understand it, a remote control. So you have all the power of your computer, which lives over there at work, and I just have this little portable box. So we were able to finish animation, effects, lighting, and one or two other things all remotely, and pretty efficiently.
Yeah, I'd say it was the same for us. We were about 50% finished when the pandemic happened. And within a few days, we were back up running daily sessions, everyone joining in via a Zoom type meeting. I think probably the biggest challenge is it's the color on a big screen, because your monitors don't exactly represent what it will be on the big screen. So we used to have a couple of people who were allowed to come into work, view it on a big screen, then look at it on a small screen and say, it's all working, but if you could just tweak these things. So I think between that and the stereo, those were the two issues that were probably the most challenging for us, whereas everything else was okay. I would say in some ways, I think because all of us were on the tail end of finishing our movies, I think it's a little bit of a different experience for the people who were starting up movies, where being together, being in a room, being able to share ideas, being able to kind of, spin out from one idea to another idea, that's not quite as organic in a Zoom type meeting. And so I think there's a little bit more of a challenge there on movies in some ways that are earlier in their cycle.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly what Mark was saying. We finished out because we all had been together for nearly 3 years. So the last couple of months, we all knew each other, and it wasn't great, but great IT people, God bless them, got us set up, and we kind of finished it. But Nora's in the middle of making another film, and I was saying to her just today, like, there's
just for all of our listeners for a minute, this is Nora Toomey,
Nora Toomey is making the movie. Yeah, My Father's Dragon. Yeah. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah, and it's a big project, and it's a pity in a way. Like, they're doing a great job and they're finding ways around it, but the kind of thing I think you're going to miss out on as long as this continues on. There's a girl, Sandra Anderson, who's in charge of all our model sheets. She's really, really talented, or young woman, talented. But when she was an intern, I was just walking past her desk, and she was doing some interny job in betweening or something. I said, "Did you draw that?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Oh, you draw the characters really good." And then she ended up fast tracking to being a model sheet person and then a supervisor. And that kind of just thing that happens in the workshop of being all together in the room, where you see what people are good at and you kind of keep an eye and say, oh, they'll be good for this department later. When it's all officially presenting over Zoom, there's something something missing, I think,
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that there's, movies, they take 2-3 years to do, but they're basically made in 5 minutes. It's always like this panic at the end. Suddenly, it's not until the heat of pressure that the best ideas happen. Like you got 5 minutes in editing, you got to close this sequence, got to be locked, and suddenly then you realize what's missing, and you start scribbling on little post-it notes as fast as you can, taking a picture with your iPhone, sending it to editing, and they're cutting it in, and it's all, and you're recording dialogue very quickly. Somebody runs downstairs, records it. It has to be that kind of fluid to really lift and make and plus the film. I think that in order for this kind of production to take place, Zoom has to really grow, and there has to be a whole other set of I don't know, accessibility and ease of people working together. I don't want to say that it can't happen. It just needs to grow from what this is right now.
That is so true. You're like, we had 5 years. Why is it that everything has to happen in the 3 minutes before the deadline happens?
Last 2
every
minutes
time.
of a football game.
The producers shaking their heads and laughing and going, "You had 3 years. Why does everything have to happen in the last?"
For those of you who had to record your talent, voice talent, how did that work? Who was, in a closet, or how did that work?
For us, we had a song that we'd been using a temp track to by a Norwegian singer, Aurora Aknes. We had recorded the orchestra, and we wanted to have a session with her and the Irish traditional musicians. And it was literally the week of lockdown. She was scheduled to come over and record it. So we had to do it like this over Zoom. And I mean, it worked really well. She's amazing, and she had the whole setup and everything she needed. So I can't really say it didn't work out, but I didn't get to meet a pop star that I wanted to meet. So that was a bummer.
We have such an international cast. We ended up recording most of our stuff via Zoom, even though we didn't have to at that time. Like recording Rachel House in New Zealand, it would have taken us like a week to get there, for a 3-hour session. So what it seems like, the process favors certain actors who, like Tom Hanks is a guy you can see as he's reading it, the whole movie is taking place in his head. Other actors are much more reactive, like they need someone else to read against. So I think this particular system that we're in now, where we're recording people in their closets, really favors people with very active imaginations who can kind of create this whole reality for themselves. And we were lucky that most of our cast was able to do that quite well.
I think for us, it really showed which of the actors had some kind of IT chops and which of the actors did not have IT chops. And, you could really tell the difference, and people were comfortable figuring it out because we were figuring out as well. We were sending them microphones and recording devices, and as you say, some people recorded from a closet. We had another recording where it was in a kitchen and we could hear everything, and we had to re-record to be able to get the quality we needed. But it was fun in a way.
Who were some of the actors that you were working with in that way?
We had to record every one of our casts. We were still doing pickups. I mean, we had most of the lines done, but there were like 7 or 8 lines for everyone. So every one of our cast, Peter Dinklage, Nick Cage, Ryan Reynolds, everyone had to kind of record in their house, in a room that worked the best. And it was a challenge for some, but others, they were easy and fantastic at it. So
when we were recording before the pandemic, you could see the difference when we have this one person that laughs really loud and we're behind glass, but her laugh would penetrate the glass. And Philip would hear that and, well, let me try it again. And so she tried to get her to laugh again. So we just moved ourselves on the inside so that there was no glass between us. When you're recording with, on Zoom, you really don't get that. That's one of those little extras that you'd have to overcome.
Pete, you mentioned that you had to record talent who was in New Zealand, for example. When this period is over, do you see a scenario where some of these remote tools will continue to be used in order to reduce travel, or were there other advantages you found?
Yeah, most likely. I mean, it is surprising. We used to fly ourselves everywhere for certain meetings and so on, and you'd say, well, could you do it remotely? And it just didn't seem possible. And now, of course, we have to, and so it's surprising how often it does work. That said, I still think like we're drafting off the coattails of years of working together, at Pixar, and so we have these productions, like Tomm was saying. The next film up for us is called Luca. It's directed by Enrico Casarosa. They started and will complete animation entirely from home. And I think, again, it's only possible because all of these animators have come from Soul and from Toy Story 4 and other films onto working together on this one. And that shared camaraderie and brainwave sharing that happens. I really feel bad for anybody who's starting that's new that doesn't have that already, having spent time in the same room.
Now, Pete, while you were working on Soul, you were also adjusting to your new additional role at Pixar as chief creative. How did you balance the two?
Well, luckily, we have a deep bench of really talented people, and people like Kori and Dan really didn't need much of my help. They're totally self-sufficient and know what they're doing. And then on home base on Soul, I was working with like Kevin Nolting, my editor, who has edited on Up and on Inside Out, and he not only can kind of read my brain and know where I want to go, but he's got a great vision as well. So I think just relying on other people, unlike Gitan, I think my job has evolved into doing less and less myself. In fact, sometimes I feel like, do I even belong? I don't actually do anything. I just tell other people what to do. But I think as a director, that's been something that I've gotten better at, or I've tried to, is understanding how to communicate to talented people, tell them what they need to do emotionally without telling them specifically, because if I can leave that to them, then I get all these great ideas that are way beyond what I thought of. If I can tell them what's emotionally needed in a scene, then I can kind of step back and watch the magic happen. So I've tried to rely on that.
To all of you, have your experiences during this pandemic prompted ideas for new animated stories that we might see in the coming years?
Well, Dan and I have been in development during the whole pandemic. So we finished Onward and then took a short break, but it's been an interesting kind of thing to come up with original new ideas remotely and via Zoom. And there's aspects of it that have been cool. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just I don't know. Maybe I'm just a dinosaur, but I just miss seeing people in the hallway and talking to them about a specific part of an idea and getting some feedback. And so there's some of that nuance that you get in the building that is still lacking, even when we're kind of just in isolation and thinking of new ideas. It's miraculously it's happening. We'll see. We pitch a few ideas in January, so knock wood. But it's been a really interesting experience, different, but still possible. So that's optimistic.
What you're saying, Kori, has inspired me for an idea that I'm developing, that it's about valuing the things that you took for granted before, the little things, about just bumping into people, in a shopping mall, how your kids can connect with each other, a couple walking dogs being able to stand and talk, shopping in a mall. It's the little things become really, really valuable and important. They become huge, and I think that's certainly something that I'm really leaning into now, in terms of whatever it is how I'm going to express that and what I do next.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. On the other side, I did a piece with Greenpeace at the start of all this about the deforestation in the Amazon, and I went down such a rabbit hole of how interconnected we all are and how much habitat destruction and species extinction is contributing to pandemic, climate crisis, and all those things. So I definitely think that's a direction we need to focus on as storytellers, and keep raising the consciousness around how we end up in this crazy mess as we're falling out of balance with the biosphere. So I think that's where I'll be focusing.
Yeah, I think I agree with Tom. It's more than the challenge to the negative things which propels up at a time like this. Even I have managed to make 2 short films based on the pandemic and on a political situation in the country. But I was hoping to actually finish the idea for my next feature film during this time. But it's simply too negative and isolating to be able to think of a film which has hope at the end of it as a theme. So if I do develop an idea also, I would feel it is dishonest to the way I feel. And I feel another year, another time is where the positivity would come in. So of course, it's natural for me to take up the time with making an animation film. But to come up with an idea for the next one, I think life needs to be a little more positive for me personally, to be able to think creatively and constructively. And that it has not been for most of us this year.
Thank you all for a fantastic conversation. And I hope everybody and your families are continue to do well and stay safe. For the Close Up with the Hollywood Reporter, I'm Carolyn Jardina.